Hi, my name is Maya, and today I'm going to be showing you guys my literacy biography. And to start off, here are some pictures of me and my family. I am the second child out of four children, my older sister Jada, myself, Maya, being the second, Elijah being the third, and my little sister Ava being the fourth. And as you can see, she's like mainly all the pictures I have because she's my favorite sibling. And then my parents, and then there's me and my boyfriend, and there's me and my best friend Kyoko on the side as well. And then there are some more photos of us growing up together. And for my introduction, I just wanted to include a picture of my grandpa because he's always been one of the most influential people in my life when it comes to reading. Reading has always played a major role in my life, both inside and outside of school. My mother would constantly make my siblings and myself read a new book each week, and she would read them too. At the end of the week, we would discuss the books with her and go over things we might not have understood. When school ended, we would still have to read a new book every week, but this time we would have to write a book report as well. My grandpa would constantly sit down with me and he would just read books with me. He thought my mom was too hard on us, so he would sometimes read the chapters to me. This always made the reading more enjoyable to me because I thought he had the best storytelling voice. This influenced me to read even more because it meant spending more time with him, and over time I began to enjoy all of the reading. So not only did he read these books to me, but he would tell me stories of his childhood as well and what it was like growing up in like Trinidad and just how his life was traveling, and it was always really interesting to hear. So it always made me a lot more interested in hearing his stories, so that kind of pushed me to read more. So some of my favorite quotes, the first one being from my grandpa was, "Limiting yourself to knowledge of everyday activity will cripple your mind. Pick up a book and learn something new." The second one was from my aunt, and she said, "Without books, you will never be able to access your true potential." My mom, which was probably my favorite one, which is, "Go read a book if you're so bored," which even though I'm 21 now, she still says to me. And the last one was, "Live to learn and learn to live," which was a quote that my high school used a lot. So some of my most influential teachers were Mrs. Sam, and I had her back in elementary school, and she told me that I don't always need to agree with someone just to make them happy. On top of that, she was the first black teacher that I had growing up, so I thought that was pretty cool because I felt like I could relate to her. My second one was Mrs. Smith, and she was my English teacher in high school, and she told me that there's always a deeper meaning and that you can always learn something new by rereading a book. Mr. Everett was my third one, and he told me that I can't always underestimate myself, and that he told me that I'm capable of much more than I thought. And the fourth one was Mrs. Rodriguez, and I learned from her that I have to push myself, and that if I don't understand something the first time, then there's always time to grow and go over it again. The most influential teacher I had growing up was Mrs. Demarest, and she was my fourth grade teacher, and she was also the first teacher I had when I moved to New Jersey. She played such an important role in my life because I feel like when I got here, a lot of my teachers didn't really understand me or where I was coming from, but she took the time to get to know me and make sure that everything was okay. And we still keep in touch with her today because she tutors my younger sister. So these are some of the books that I read in elementary school. There's Goodnight Moon, The Giving Tree, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, Chicka Chicka Boom Boom, and The Rainbow Fish. I chose these books just because these are still books that I remember even now, and they had the most influence on me when I was younger because my mom would read them to me before bed. These are just pictures of my elementary school. This is PS 203, which is the school I went to when I lived in Brooklyn, and the second one is Johnson Park, which is the school I attended when I moved to Princeton. One of the most influential books I read in elementary school was The Giving Tree. It taught me the importance of kindness, loyalty, and friendship. The book molded me into the forgiving person I am today because it laid down the foundation of my personality. The book taught me that love is love and it can be between you and whoever you want it to be with. I learned that there was something to appreciate within everything and everyone. My teacher, Mrs. Sam, gave us an activity where we had to find our wow pages. We'd go through a book and pick the pages that interested us the most, and we'd have to explain how it made us feel and how we could relate to it. These are just three of my favorite quotes from the book. The first one was, "Well, an old stump is good for sitting and resting. Come, boys, sit down and rest." The second one was, "Once there was a tree and she loved the little boy." And the third one was, "And she loved the little boy very much, even more than she loved herself." And I think the last one is probably my favorite out of the three just because it shows how selfless people can be, even without the other person knowing. These are some of the books that I read in middle school. The first one was A Separate Piece. There's Animal Farm, The Timekeeper, To Kill a Mockingbird, and Girl with the Pearl Earring. These were probably my favorite books out of all the books we read in middle school, just because they still stick with me today. And this is just a picture of my middle school. You can't really see it because it's surrounded by a lot of trees, but the name is actually no longer John Witherspoon Middle School. They're in the works of changing it just because of the racist ties it has to the person that it's named after, which I think is pretty cool. So, for my learning values in middle school, I learned that reading in middle school is an entirely different concept from reading in elementary school. In elementary school, you read the book and that's it, but in middle school, they want you to read deeper into the text. The teachers wanted us to find the meaning in what the characters were saying. This is when I first began to dig beneath the text. We had to read to discover and reveal what was really going on in the book. We had to figure out the plot, the climax, and figure out what certain events were foreshadowing. It taught me that there is more to reading than just the words and the character is speaking, and that sometimes certain occurrences can be interpreted differently. Girl with a Pearl Earring was the most influential book to me in middle school because it showed me that women can be empowered no matter what they work, or no matter who they work for. And my favorite activity was going around the room, having each other explain what we thought the painting portrayed. It showed me that while we all may see the same thing, we can perceive it differently. My favorite quote from the book, A Girl with a Pearl Earring, was, "There needs to be some disorder in the scene." To contrast with her tranquility, there was a long pause. He was gazing at the table. I waited, wiping my hands against my apron. I had not thought I would learn something from a maid, he said at last. And one of the main reasons that I like this quote so much was that it shows you can't just judge a person by their appearance, and that there's more to someone than just by the way they look. You can gain knowledge from practically anybody, and you shouldn't judge them based on how you perceive them. So now moving on to high school, some of the books we read were The Great Gatsby, The Scarlet Letter, Macbeth, The Catcher in the Rye, The Namesake, and The Kite Runner. And I think out of all these books, my least favorite was probably Macbeth, just because I feel like Shakespeare is probably one of the hardest things to understand. So this is just a picture of my high school. This is the older half of the building. There's two parts of it. There's the newer half and the older half. But I think my first time getting to the high school, it took me about a week to be able to find all my classes without getting lost. So by the time I got to high school, my literacy skills had reached a pretty good point, and I felt that the time we spent in the classroom was time spent polishing these skills. My teachers helped me to develop my mind, and I was taught that I need to voice my own opinion and how important it was. Reading was my because reading increased my vocabulary and my knowledge of how to correctly use new words. It helps me to clearly articulate what I want to say. The book The Namesake was probably the most influential book I read in high school, and probably one of my favorite books from high school. And it just taught me to appreciate where you come from, what your ancestors had to do to get you where you are. The English teacher I had at the time was Miss Jejic, and she always made me read, always just reminded me how reading was fun. When she saw that I had no interest in the book, she would always find a way to make it more interesting or relatable. These are just two of my favorite quotes from the book The Namesake, and the first one is, "Do yourself a favor before it's too late, without thinking too much about it first. Pack a pillow and a blanket and see as much of the world as you can. You will not regret it one day, and it will be too late." And the second was, "He at once feels guilty and exhilarated, protected as if by an invisible shield." And here's just my vision board and my dream board for the future. I included a quote from Bob Marley, which is, "Don't worry, be happy," because life is too short to sit around and be upset with somebody who is probably not going to mean anything to you in the future. I included a picture of a camera because photography is one of my favorite hobbies, and I would love to travel the world and take pictures. Another one I include was just Black Lives Matter and being a feminist, a part of Black Lives Matter. And this is important to me because as a black person, I feel like I shouldn't have to still be asking for equality in 2020. I still shouldn't have to be worried about going outside and then being stopped by somebody simply because of the color of my skin. I also include a picture of my parents at their wedding because I think having a marriage like my parents is definitely something I want in the future, because even today, they still goof around with each other and they still express how much they love each other. And I just want to be able to live a good life. I want to be able to just enjoy everything for what it is and just not take anything for granted. So that is it for my literacy biography. Thank you guys for listening.